This episode of Mr. Hutchings History is now streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all your favorite platforms like Castbox, Podcast Addict, and Amazon Music. Tune in now.
Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
All right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time we're looking at something I bet most people don't know much about.
Sounds intriguing already. I'm ready when you are.
Well, we're going to be talking about Japanese Latin Americans, specifically in Brazil during World War II.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. We found this episode from Mr. Hutchings History, and it got us thinking a lot about how the U.S. had their hands in a lot of things back then. This whole situation in Brazil, it shows how much influence they had.
Yeah, the U.S.'s role in global affairs during that period, it can't be overstated. But it also brings up those questions of racial prejudice.
Exactly. All tangled up with national security concerns. Kind of a perfect storm, you know?
Absolutely. And it's so important to look at these often forgotten corners of history.
Yeah, see how global conflicts can really impact local communities in ways we don't always expect.
Right. We tend to think big picture battles, strategies, all that. But it's the individual stories, the personal experiences that really hit home.
Totally. So picture this. Early 1900s, Brazil's booming. They need workers, especially for those coffee plantations.
Lots of land, lots of opportunity.
Exactly. Now, around the same time, you've got Japanese folks looking for a new start. Many were headed for the U.S., but then...
1924, the U.S. slams the door shut with that Immigration Act.
Bam. Doors closed.
Yeah.
And a lot of these folks got steered towards South America instead.
It's amazing how one country's policy can reshape another's, you know?
It really is. So you've got this wave of Japanese immigration to Brazil, and they thrived. By the 1940s...
250,000 Japanese Brazilians.
Contributing a ton to the economy.
Built up these vibrant, successful communities.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
There was this tension simmering beneath the surface.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
This successful community, they faced prejudice, weren't fully embraced.
Holding on to their language, traditions, even their business practices.
Right. Didn't exactly sit well with everyone, did it?
Sadly, no. Classic case of the outsider group perceived as a threat.
Yeah, whether it's to the social order or to economic power.
It's a recurring theme. And in Brazil, those existing racial biases, well, they just fueled the fire when wartime fears started spreading.
And that takes us to 1942, the Rio de Janeiro Conference. All the big players in the Americas gathered together.
And the U.S., fresh into the war themselves, they're leading the charge.
Oh, yeah. They were worried about Axis influence in their backyard, especially near the Panama Canal.
Vitally important strategic location.
You bet. So the U.S. starts putting the pressure on Latin American countries to crack down on anyone they saw as an enemy alien.
And that included, of course, anyone of German, Italian, or Japanese descent.
Right, so even if these folks were citizens or had been living there peacefully for years.
Suddenly they're suspects just because of their heritage.
Scary how quickly individual rights can get tossed aside when war's involved.
It's a sobering reminder of how fear and suspicion can override everything else.
So Brazil, wanting to stay in the U.S.'s good graces, makes a big shift.
Towards actively repressing Japanese Brazilians.
Wow. So this conference, it was a turning point.
No doubt about it.
But how did this repression actually play out? What did they actually do?
Well, they started with surveillance, keeping tabs on people, but then it escalated. Arrests based on, honestly, the flimsiest suspicions, fueled by rumors and unfounded accusations.
Yikes. So then what'd they do next?
Then they did something truly chilling. They implemented a law banning the Japanese language in public.
Wait, a language ban? That's just, wow. Why would they go that far?
On the surface, they said it was to prevent espionage, subversive activities.
Sure.
But look deeper, and it's clear this was about more than just security.
Like what?
This was about suppressing Japanese culture, forcing assimilation.
Wow, so families suddenly can't speak their language openly.
Kids punished for speaking their mother tongue.
That just tears at the very fabric of their identity.
Absolutely. Constant surveillance, suspicion, unable to express themselves freely.
And this was just the beginning.
You got it. The restrictions, they were only going to get worse from there. That language ban, it was like a punch to the gut. But they didn't stop there. They started confiscating radios.
Oh, no.
And cameras, too. Anything they thought could be used for, spying.
Trying to isolate them even further, cutting them off.
Exactly. Like they wanted to erase their presence completely.
It's crazy how fear can make people do such drastic things. And the irony is, Despite all this, all these restrictions?
There was no real evidence of any threat from Japanese Brazilians. None.
So, if it wasn't about actual danger, what was it really about?
Well, that's where things get interesting. Historians look at this period through different lenses.
Okay, different perspectives. I like it. Break it down for me.
So one view is the national security perspective. Basically, Brazil, with all that pressure from the U.S.
They were scared, right? Worried about the war.
Yeah, they were genuinely concerned, especially with the whole Panama Canal situation.
Made sense, strategically speaking.
Exactly. But this view, it kind of downplays the role of prejudice, doesn't it?
Yeah, like it doesn't tell the whole story.
Right, and that's where the racial prejudice perspective comes in. Historians who see things this way, they believe it boils down to xenophobia.
Fear of the other.
Yeah, wanting to control, marginalize a successful minority group.
A group they already resented.
Exactly. The U.S. pressure, it didn't come out of nowhere. It just amplified those existing biases.
So it's not just about national security. It's about using that anxiety to push a discriminatory agenda.
You got it. Then you've got the economic exploitation angle. This one focuses on the money.
Oh, the money trail.
Always follow the money, right. The Japanese Brazilians, they were successful, had assets, businesses.
Prime targets.
And some people saw an opportunity to profit from their misfortune.
It's disturbing to think that greed could play a part in persecuting an entire community.
It's a dark side of human nature, for sure. But it's important to remember these perspectives aren't mutually exclusive.
Oh, so it could be a mix of all of them.
Exactly, a complex web of motivations all tangled up together. It's rarely just one thing.
Okay, I get that. So we got the restrictions, the lack of evidence, the different interpretations. But what was life actually like for Japanese Brazilians during all this?
Imagine living under constant suspicion, never knowing who to trust.
It must have been terrifying.
Families were torn apart, livelihoods destroyed, their culture suppressed.
So much loss, so much pain. You know, I read a story about a Japanese Brazilian shopkeeper.
Oh, yeah.
His store got vandalized, family harassed, just because he looked like the enemy.
It's those personal stories, the individual experiences that really drive it home.
Absolutely. They remind us that prejudice has real-world consequences. You know, it hurts real people.
It's about more than just statistics and policies. It's about lives being turned upside down.
Okay, so we've talked about the escalating restrictions, the lack of justification, but then...
Things were about to get even worse.
What happened?
1943, Brazil took the most drastic step yet. Forced evacuations of Japanese Brazilians from the coast.
Wait, seriously? They forced them to leave their homes?
The official reason. Coastline was vulnerable. They posed a security risk.
But you said there wasn't any evidence of a threat.
Exactly. So a lot of people question the real motives behind this.
So an entire community uprooted, displaced.
Yeah.
Just based on suspicion.
Sadly, yes. A clear violation of their rights, driven by fear and prejudice. The consequences were devastating.
Losing everything they'd worked for, just because of their ancestry.
It's a perfect example of how fear can make people act irrationally, unjustly.
So they're forced from their homes, their language banned, their movements restricted. It's like they're systematically being erased.
And unfortunately, the worst was yet to come.
What else could they possibly do?
The final blow. Closure of Japanese-owned businesses. And they froze their bank accounts.
No way. What was the justification for that?
The government said it was to prevent economic sabotage, weaken the enemy.
Right, the enemy that didn't exist.
Exactly. But critics, they argue it was just a way to transfer wealth, to take advantage of the situation.
Wow. So the economic exploitation, it all comes full circle.
It's a really dark chapter, and it makes you think about how prejudice can be used to justify economic gain.
Absolutely. So we have all these different interpretations, but how do we know what really happened? What evidence is there?
Well, there are tons of official government documents, things like arrest orders, language decrees, property confiscation records.
Wow, that's a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, they were very thorough. It's actually quite chilling to see how meticulously they planned and executed these policies.
Like looking into the machinery of oppression.
Exactly. But it's important to remember the human side of things, too.
Yeah, the personal stories.
Right, those are crucial. We need to hear the voices of those directly affected, you know. Letters, diaries, oral histories.
Those are the things that really bring history to life.
They give you the emotional impact, the fear, the uncertainty, the resilience.
And sometimes they challenge the official narrative, right?
Absolutely. They show the lived realities that those in power often ignore.
Okay, so we've got the documents, the personal accounts. Anything else?
Well, there are also reports from the U.S. State Department.
Oh, so we can see the U.S.'s role in all this.
Yeah, they provide a valuable perspective. You can see the behind-the-scenes discussions, the pressure they were putting on Brazil.
Connecting the global context to the local actions.
Exactly. It all adds up to a pretty complete picture, but it's a complex one.
So we've seen what happened, but what about the aftermath? How did the Japanese-Brazilian community recover from all this?
It's hard to even imagine, starting over after going through something like that.
Yeah, how do you even begin to rebuild when you've lost your home, your business, everything you've worked for?
It was a long road back, and for many, the scars never fully faded.
The economic impact alone must have been crippling.
It was. And then you add the social stigma, that feeling of being ostracized.
Wait, they didn't truly belong.
It made it so hard for them to fully reintegrate back into society.
But they did rebuild, right? They found a way to move forward.
They did. It's pretty remarkable, actually. And in a way, they had an unexpected ally, Japan.
Japan? But they were the enemy.
I know, right? It's ironic. But after the war, Japan's economy just exploded.
Ah, the Japanese economic miracle.
Exactly. They needed skilled workers, and Japanese Brazilians, with their work ethic and resilience, they were suddenly in high demand.
Wow, talk about a twist of fate.
It's a great example of how global events can have these unintended consequences.
Sometimes leading to unexpected paths to healing.
Exactly. But even with that economic boost, the trauma of that period, it lingered.
That sense of betrayal, of injustice.
It's still felt today. Many Japanese Brazilians are still seeking recognition, redress for what happened.
It's a reminder that the wounds of the past, they can take generations to heal.
Absolutely. And it makes you think about how this story connects to what we're seeing today.
Oh, yeah.
The fears, the prejudices, that balancing act between security and individual rights.
We're still grappling with those same issues.
We are. Look how quickly fear can be exploited, how easily rights can be eroded when people feel threatened.
Especially during times of crisis.
Exactly. The Japanese-Brazilian experience, it's a cautionary tale,
A reminder to be vigilant, to protect those freedoms, to challenge discriminatory policies.
No matter how justified they may seem at the time.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this chapter of history, what's the big takeaway?
Well, we saw how much influence the U.S. had shaping Brazil's policies.
Pushing them towards stricter control, more surveillance.
And how those policies were fueled by this toxic mix of racial prejudice and wartime fear.
Leading to actions that were just plain wrong,
Yeah.
even though there was no real threat.
The impact on the Japanese-Brazilian community was devastating, and the effects are still felt today.
But it's also a story of resilience, of rebuilding, of reclaiming their place in society.
It's a testament to the strength of the human spirit, and a powerful reminder of the importance of remembering these often forgotten stories.
Exactly. Understanding the past, even the difficult parts, is crucial to building a better future.
Absolutely. By learning from these mistakes, we can hopefully prevent them from happening again.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time as we uncover another piece of hidden history.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.